Hey guys, it's Sasha. The financial year ends in just 1 week. On the 5th of April is the last day of the current financial year, and from the 6th of April, the next financial year starts. There are a few things in personal finance that actually operate on financial years, and there are a few tricks that you can use in order to take advantage of some of these things that I'm going to cover. Some of these might be more obvious, and some of these you might already know, but some others I have a feeling a lot of people probably won't know. So I just thought it would be really interesting to cover them, given where we are in the time of the year. So hopefully you'll learn something new. Now, as a really brief disclaimer, I am not a financial advisor. I cannot provide financial advice to you. This is purely for educational purposes. If you do need financial advice, please make sure you go and seek the help of a suitably qualified professional. First, let's start with something that might seem obvious. Opening an ISA and making a deposit. Each year, you can go and deposit up to £20,000 into ISAs. And the moment the 6th of April comes, that limit gets reset and you have another £20,000 available for the next year. This isn't probably much of an issue for most people because most people probably will not be in a position when they're going to be depositing £20,000 every single year into investments. But life can throw funny things at you. You might find that you'll get paid a big bonus at work next year for whatever reason. Maybe a company will be acquired. Maybe you're going to come into some kind of money because you sell an asset that maybe you don't even know you own at the moment. Maybe for whatever reason you're going to come into inheritance. There's a lot of different reasons why suddenly you might come across a load of money and you will want to go and do something with that money. So if you go and wait in terms of depositing money into ISAs to next year, you might go and eat into that allowance, which may prevent you from being able to use it next year. So if you're in a position where you're considering putting money into ISAs, for example, you might want to go and do it before the end of the current financial year. Now, Trading 212 is a very popular platform for stocks and shares ISAs, but right now, they are not accepting new customers. So although they're the cheapest, you can't go and actually open an account with them. So if you want to go and open that account with them by using my link in the description below at some point in the future, you may want to wait, but instead you can go and open, for example, some other ISA account. Vanguard is a very good value option if you're not putting a lot of money into, although you're restricted in only putting money into their proprietary funds. You can't invest in actual stocks and shares, if you like, through that platform. Free trade is another option. You can go and use my link in the description below to get yourself a free share, which may offset the £3 per month fee for the next month or two before maybe Trading 212 opens up to new accounts again, which is another little trick. Make sure you use my link in order to get that. But even if you don't want to go and set up a investing ISA right now, you can go and actually put money into a cash ISA. It will earn you nothing. It'll earn you probably below inflation. But if you want to just put some money in, bake that in, and then wait until Trading 212 reopens or until you want to put it into some other form of ISA, you can do that, and then you've actually used this year's allowance, and you can just transfer it next year to whichever ISA you choose. Relating to the first point, if you are in a position when you're contributing to ISAs and putting a lot of money into it, you may want to actually go and max this allowance, or at least use as much as possible of it. And this is another consideration. It then leaves you with the full allowance starting, the following year when the 6th of April comes to do whatever you want with. So if you're in a position where you're kind of thinking, well, maybe next month I'll put a bit of money sitting currently in my current account, maybe I'll put it in next year. You might want to go and just accelerate that slightly so that you have that full £20,000 available next year, just in case you have some other better use for it. I don't know, maybe you're going to be buying a house, making use of leases, etc. Now, while we're on that topic, for anyone who is planning to buy a house or maybe wants to go and use a lifetime ISA account for retirement planning, these can be an incredibly good option if you're in the right situation. You can deposit up to £4,000 into one of these types of ISAs. They're the only ISA that have a different limit to everything else, and the government will top it up by another £1,000 on top. So if you're in that position where you're buying a house, say 12 months from now or slightly later, 12 months is a minimum term that you have to hold a lifetime ISA before you can use it for that purpose, you might want to be able to go and put £4,000 of your deposit into it, say now, before the end of financial year, get the £1,000 government top up, then put another £4,000 from the 6th of April, and then the government will put in another £1,000. So even before your money actually grows or does anything in the markets or gets any interest, you're already £2,000 up on your deposit, which is a pretty nice little freebie because this literally is free money given to you by the government. Next, this one might be a little bit more interesting. If you're investing, one thing you might want to think about is crystallizing gains. The annual 0% allowance for capital gains in the UK is £12,300. That means that's how much you can earn before you have to pay capital gains tax. But the thing is, even if you're not above that allowance now, even if that's not hitting you, it might be there in the future. It might be there in 3 years' time. It might be there in 4 years' time. You just don't know, right? Like maybe your life will change. Your investments will grow, whatever. Now, if you hold your shares for a long time and then you cash them all in at the same time, you might be liable to be paying capital gains if those shares are not sitting inside a stocks and shares ISA account, which is another good reason to open a stocks and shares ISA account if you're wanting to consider investing. But here's a trick you can employ. Bed and breakfasting actually prevents you from cashing in your shares and then buying them back immediately after. It exists in order to prevent people from cashing them in just before the end of the financial year and then rebuying the same shares just after the end, so that you're essentially keeping your gains under the 12,300 threshold for every single year. But you can use a very different thing to your advantage. You can go and sell, for example, if you have a VUSA stock like I do, you can go and sell those shares in that ETF. And then the next day, for example, on the 6th of April, well, actually it will be one day later because we're in Easter weekend, but you get the drift. You can then go and buy back a different S&P 500 ETF that costs the same. For example, the iShares equivalent IUSA. And you can do that perfectly legally, and that's not subject to bed and breakfasting because you're buying different ETFs. Just be very careful. The same ETF might have different classes of shares, which some people are not aware of. So you can't do this trick with, for example, selling VUSA and then buying back VUAG, which is the accumulating version of the same thing. I think just be a bit careful. On the flip side of this, you might also want to consider crystallizing any losses. If you own shares in a company that is currently down from when you bought them, and you're essentially in the red on that company, if you go and sell those particular shares, you might be able to book those losses in, and there's two really good reasons for it. If in this tax year you might be having to pay any kind of capital gains, those can offset any gains in other companies, and you're essentially going to be reducing your tax burden by doing it. But even if you're not in that position, even if you have no capital gains to pay whatsoever, or if they're below the 12,300 threshold, which means you don't really care, if you go and book the losses outside an ISA, essentially by selling the shares and then taking that hit without rebuying them within 30-day window, because then bed and breakfasting will apply, then you can go and use those losses for up to 4 financial years in the future in order to offset any capital gains you may make at that point. So if at that point you sell something, like maybe you'll have a second home, or maybe something else, who knows, or maybe you're going to have non-ISA investments for whatever reason. Maybe it'll be Bitcoin, for example. I don't know. If you then go and sell and have capital gains at that point, if you've booked losses in the previous 4 financial years, you can then carry them forward and offset that capital gains at that point. Interesting. Another trick for anyone who might have capital gains to pay is to reverse the impact of bed and breakfasting rule and make it work in your favor. This is one that most people don't really think about, but is really powerful and really interesting. If you are due to pay capital gains tax on your shares that you've recently sold, what you could do, if you choose to do so, is to go and essentially buy them back within the 30-day window. So for example, let's say you sold a bunch of shares, or you sold some Bitcoin, or whatever it may be, and you then use the money, but you've done that within the last 30 days. If you go and buy those exact same shares or exact same asset back within the 30-day window, and then bed and breakfasting applies, and then the original sale is as good as not having happened in the eyes of HMRC. So what that means is if you do have the cash to go and do that, there's nothing stopping you technically going and buying them back and then selling them at some point in the next financial year, let's say later on next week. And in that situation, the capital gains tax will essentially then be deferred until the next financial year, if it's going to be due, and maybe you'll go and incur further losses next year, or maybe you'll have more money to pay the capital gains tax. It doesn't really matter. It's just something where you can essentially flip the impact of that bed and breakfasting to kind of use it to your advantage if you choose to do so. Another really important thing to remember is pension contributions. Now, I have talked quite a lot about pensions in the past, where I am generally a very big proponent of planning for your future, but I made one recent video where suddenly everyone thinks that I'm completely against them, which is just not true. Pensions are crucial. The key is to ensure how to use them to your advantage and to understand fully all the different tax implications, including the new lifetime allowance that is becoming more of a thing. Now, if you're in a position to make pension contributions, you'll be able to get the government to top it up to basic rate tax, for example, if you're making it outside your workplace pension. So if that's something that you choose to do or you want to do, that is a nice little extra, and when the end of the financial year happens, you can then go and claim back any extra above the basic rate if you are earning more, if you're a higher additional rate taxpayer. You're also allowed to contribute, this is really important, up to £40,000 per year to your pension, although this probably won't affect many people at all, but it's just really important. You probably also don't want to be contributing that sort of money if you're relatively young because of the lifetime allowance and the tax implications, but maybe if you're very close to retirement age and you're sitting on a load of cash, that might be something that actually works out because you'll be able to benefit from the tax benefits of doing it. I hope you guys found this useful. If you have, please make sure you hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. And as always, I will see you guys later.